Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Sagida. I was born in Mugumu village in Serengeti province of Tanzania in 1983. Unfortunately, I did not see Aberdeen Football Club winning the Aberdeen European Cup that year, but I wear the Aberdeen jacket in pride. My parents had shifted from Kenya to Tanzania in search of casual regular work. We lived in a miserable life in the foreign country. In 1990, things worsened for us because the president of Kenya by then, President Daniel Arap Moi, chased all Tanzanians citizens who worked and living and working in Kenya. When this fact was made known to the president of Tanzania, he became furious and in return chased away all Kenyans who are living and working in Tanzania. We were among this unwanted group back to Kenya. They turned up very late at night, forced us to leave. We had no idea where to go. It was very dark. We left our foreign country, Kenya. It was painful leaving the foreign country with nothing apart from the clothes we wore on that particular night. It was a terrible journey for me since I was born and lived in Tanzania since birth. I knew nothing about my Kenyan origin. Both my parents and my grandparents had stayed without visiting Kenya, therefore they were all confused as where to begin as well as where to go and live. Back in Kenya, life was to be worse than ever before. Our grandfather sold the family land and therefore we had nowhere to settle. We suffered a lot as my father had to request his old friends to accommodate us in their homes. In these homes, we were to be like slaves. Our work was to look after kettles and sheep to earn a plate of food and somewhere to spend a night. In 1992, the young brother to our grandfather invited us to live in his home since he had a large portion of land. We were so much excited since we thought the storms of suffering were over. Little did we know the worst was years to come. The hovel that we were shown to live in was a structure that was used years before but left to fall on its own when a new house was constructed for them. We needed not to go outside to see the stars, as we could easily count them from inside. The worst was during the rain season. The roof was leaking from all corners. The noise made by the containers we set to hold water was very loud and our tattered mattress got soaked with water. I wondered if this was to always be the life for us. My grandfather and both my parents turned into drinking local brew. They became addicted within time and therefore no much progress took place in our lives. My young grandfather had given us somewhere to call a home, but never gave us education. Instead, he made us to be casual workers in his large parcel of. We had different courses with my father and my sisters working on the farm, and my mother was to cook for everyone. My grandmother could not be allocated any duties since she was physically challenged. My grandfather and I were to graze the herd of cattle and the flock of sheep. We worked without resting all day long, day in, day out. A village elder realized that we were not going to school despite our age being that of school-going children. He recommended that we be taken to school, I plus my 4 sisters. We joined primary school, however, most of the time we were chased out of class due to school fees arrears. I completed my primary level education and joined secondary school, but unfortunately I had to drop out of while in Form 2, since my young grandfather who was paying our school fees refused to pay anymore. By then my parents had added more children to the family, making us 8 in total, which in turn added the financial strains. When I dropped out of school, I worked as a casual laborer again, and whenever I got a chance to work, I did it with determination to pay school fees for my young sibling. Today, I'm so happy to see one of them being a secondary school teacher in Kenya. In 2005, I got offered a job to take care of a 3-month-old baby in town called Iten. I love this work and I worked with zeal, with a lot of zeal. I was paid 1,300 shillings per month, which is about 10 pounds. My duties including taking care of the child, washing clothes and mopping the house. I did this kind of duties for 2 years despite them being traditionally associated with the female genders. In 2007, I decided to be self-employed. I quitted that job. I bought an ordinary bicycle and I started ferrying people from one point to another and fetching water for people and any other activities that I would use the bicycle to earn. This job was very difficult since I used a lot of energy. I also ate a lot, like Miles and Gideon. I used to make 1,200 shillings a day since there were only few bicycles operating by then in Iten town. I used the money to clothe my parents and bought food for them. By that point, I was also married to my beautiful wife, Elizabeth, and we had son, Daniel. Unfortunately, they had been forced to go back to their parents' home due to poverty and challenges we were going through. Daniel was born a healthy baby. Due to meningitis, he became paralyzed. With the money I was making by then, I was able to bring them back to live with me. After operating the bicycle business for 3 years, I managed to save enough money that enabled me to buy a brand new motorbike. After some times of ferrying people from one point to the other, I managed to save money and buy a piece of land where I decided to build my parents a small house. In 2012, the number of motorbikes operating in 10 towns went high, meaning that the earnings went down. It was difficult to make even 500 shillings a day. Life was difficult again because as Dan was growing older, he needed more attention. Until today, he can't feed himself or even walk. In the same year, I met an angel Miles from Scotland who became my best friend. He asked me what he could do for me to help. I was surprised. This was difficult for me to answer. Realizing that I wasn't prepared to answer that time, he gave me more time to ponder about the same. I sought advice from my friends that I was working with. Some could tell me to request him to buy for me a piece of land, car, or build a house for me. All this did not impress me since my angel too did neither own a car nor a house. When we met, he asked for my response. I made my request and my wish and said, if you can manage to help look for special treatment for my son Dan, I will be so happy. Not being content with my response, he asked me what else I would like him to do for me. I told him that my joy will be full if my son gets treated, and that is the time he began to tell me about his plan with his Kenyan friend, one by the name Gathimba. Miles would call me when he need to go out somewhere and we could travel around on my motorbike. He began taking my son Dan for therapy clinics 3 days in a week. One evening in 2015, when my friend had visited several families, that day he got sick. He deteriorated and most of his friends thought that he wouldn't get well anytime soon. I decided to accompany him at the hospital and stayed awake from 7 a.m. until 4 p.m. the next day. He got well and he was discharged. He was so much impressed by my action that invited me to accompany him and his GF team to Karatina for a house building project. In return to Iten, he and his co-founder, Gideon Gathimba, offered me a job at GEF. Through this foundation, we have managed to help so many children. We have even slept on the mud floor to have an experience of such children who are less fortunate and to raise funds and awareness for them. Personally, I'm touched when I see children suffering, being a victim of the same things I went through. The little support of any kind does wonders in their lives. They live to tell how their lives were transformed by a well-wisher from UK, and maybe they too will change lives of others. GF has transformed my life, and were it not for this foundation, my life could not be the way it is today. GF has changed and transformed me from nothing to something. I also now have a beautiful daughter called Joy, who we named Joy because of the happiness she brought in our lives. I would like to appreciate all of you for your support towards transforming vulnerable lives back in my home country, Kenya. I never knew that one day I'll be in an airplane, but through GF and your willingness to assist, I'm the first person in my village to have traveled by air when I went from Eldoret to Nairobi 2 years ago. I, David Sagida Marenge, am always grateful to you all for your incredible concern towards the suffering children of Kenya. May the Almighty God bless you abundantly. Thank you.